Stream is presumably transferred over. If you are on YouTube, please let me know that you can hear us. Okay, issue 527 on the PM repo. Consensus layer call 87. We'll go over the merge stuff. I got a couple of agenda items. Generally, if we have any other client updates, then a couple of discussions around some spec stuff, and then open discussion. Any closing remarks? So on the merge, I believe we literally just had a shadow fork. Like, are we an epoch in or something? Does anybody want to tell us what's going on here?
Yeah, I can go. We just hit TTD for mainnet Shadow Fork 5. It's too early to say anything, but in the last epoch, I think there was 1 or 2 missed slots, so it looks quite good so far. We are doing a few things differently this time around. We have an equal client split, so 25% each EL and 20% each CL. Besides that, we are running sync tests. So I just paused either a CL or EL, and we have one of each combination running for Get, Nethermind, Besu. Not doing Ericon this time because they have some other sync issues that they're figuring out. Besides all of that, the EF security team is running some address sanitizer, thread sanitizer, memory sanitizer, race condition stuff. So we're gonna collect hopefully a lot of data this time around. And I can update Spring call about finality. That's it from me, this shadow fork.
Great. Is there a link that anyone can kind of follow what's going on here, like we usually have with these, like Block Explorer, etc.?
Also, ignore the Ericon ones. They have an issue with ETH stats, so that's not really valid data. But the other ones are valid. So if some other client goes offline on ETH stats, please let us know.
Great. Thank you. I know there are independent testing calls. It's enough of an important effort. Is there anything to surface there to the wider group on testing in general? Okay. All good. Okay, next up is, so on the Awkward Devs call, which I believe everyone on this call is very likely aware at this point, Ropsten was decided to move forward on Ropsten. There were a few consensus layer teams on there giving the thumbs up as well. There was even a TTD chosen, I believe, on the call, but it seems that we maybe need to reconfigure the TTD. Tim, you brought this up. Can you give us the TLDR?
Yes, TLDR is we messed up choosing the TTD. Slightly longer version is that Ropsten is the hardest network for which to predict the total difficulty value because the block times and the hash rates are quite unstable. So we made some new estimates now, and we think they're better. But then the risk is, the risk with choosing the TTD is like, if we choose one that happens before Bellatrix, that's really bad. So we were aiming, if Bellatrix is on like June 3rd, we were aiming for June 8th to be the TTD. We can do either we keep this value and we like massively increase the hash rate on Ropsten a week before so that we kind of hit it quicker. It seems like that is doable, but it's still like a lot of hash rate. And then we kind of updated the model which predicts the TTD. And so the other two things we can do is either we pick a new value that's much lower that we now think is actually going to happen on June 8th. And then the risk is like, if we're wrong again, maybe it happens sooner. or the other idea is maybe we pick a value that we think might happen more like June 15th, and then a week before hitting it, we start adding way more hash rates to the chain, so that we hit this like June 15th one on June 8th, but it's still lower than the one we currently have, so it just requires less hash rate to be added to Ropsten.
What is our ability to add hash rate? Like, do we control hashes on the order of like 50% of what's on there, on that network or something?
I think someone on our team checked that yesterday. Marius, do you remember?
Yeah, so we can add enough hash rate, I think. There's
What order, Mac?
in the order of like 1 gigahash.
Like, is that all we need to fix this? Is like 1 gigahash? Or
At least according to the calculation that I did like some days ago. But
and 1 gigahash over how long? Like a week or a month, a day?
until TTD.
So until TTD.
So
Yes.
from that, from now
That-
till TTD.
Adding one, so having Ropsten on 1 gigahash would hit TTD at the required point.
And that's option one. We could also change it and then turn on the hash power a week before.
And yeah, Marius, you have a comment saying the new estimates are worse. What do you mean by that?
Yes, so I just ran the estimates, the new TTD estimates from Mario, and they should be hit either on the 24th, so in 5 days, or on the 28th, so in 9 days. So
you're saying they're too low.
They're way too low.
Okay.
The 43 number is way too low, or an updated number?
The 42 one is way too low.
Gotcha.
Okay, and so basically what we had was 43.5 or 435 originally. So I mean, yeah, the option so I guess one thing that would be helpful to know is like beyond the EF, are there other people who can contribute hash rate if we need? But I mean, we can probably scale a lot of it.
Hash.
Yeah,
Can
just,
you
it
mine
feels like just
Ropsten?
renting is. Yeah, renting is super easy. Like it's a couple of clicks. You just spend some ETH, 0.015 ETH per day. I'll get you a gigahash. If we only need a month, it feels like the amount of money spent on this call is likely to outstrip that cost.
Yes. I think that's the way to do it.
Okay. Okay, so we keep the value, but how do we make sure we don't add too much hash rate too soon? And what, like, how do we tweak this basically?
We start adding hash rate once all the clients have updated their images, and then we don't care.
Okay.
When is the Bellatrix fork? When is the
June
Bellatrix?
3rd?
Yeah.
Okay. So waiting a week from now, or a week and a half from now, and then maybe renting more power if we need to is a bit safer than like cranking on it right now.
Yeah. And one thing that was neat with the June 8th is like it happens like a couple days before all core devs, so it would be neat to have the fork happen a few days, and then we can kind of see how it went and discuss like what we want to do next on the calls. And it's not the end of the world if we lose a week because it happens like say on the 10th, but it would be nice to not lose that week.
Well, we can also
I will,
rent 4 gigahashes instead of 1.
Yes.
Someone should double check my numbers on that, make sure I'm correct. I am not a miner, I'm not a professional. I believe those numbers are mentioned are correct, but I might be like off by orders of magnitude. So someone double check me.
Okay. I will look into it though. I sort of assume you couldn't rent nice hash for testnets, but like I'll look into it.
I think they'll
All you're
point your
doing is
hashes at
renting
whatever you
ETH
want.
hash.
Yeah,
You just
I know
mentioned cash
it makes
over
sense. Yeah, just my brain did not think, but yeah, I'll look into it.
Okay.
Guys, I think we should check block production on MSF on mainnet Shadow Fork 5 because something seems to be wrong, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think we're hitting this issue we had in the past where we're hitting timeouts. So blocks are being produced and we're going to finalize, but transactions aren't included. So we really
only empty blocks, and we, for example, Nethermind is producing only with client combos that Lodestar and Nimbus. So the clients combo that are producing that are not giving us enough time. And all clients are producing empty blocks.
Yeah, so Lodestar has an ongoing PR for this to address. Maybe next week we'll be able to address and issue FCUs ahead of the time so that ELs can make blocks.
We do know that Geth switched to also have the async, but I wouldn't suspect that the clients that were producing blocks with Nethermind previously would not be able to produce them with Geth. So we might just be seeing a higher percentage because of the distribution now, the even distribution, but it might be just the same known issue. I guess let's get the percentage, but we can keep moving on this call while some people investigate. Okay. So we are not, at least currently, the people on this call think that we should not adjust the TTD.
We're happy with all options from Lighthouse perspective.
Okay. So right now we won't adjust the TTD, and we'll probably readdress this in 1 week on all core devs, Tim.
Yeah, sounds good. And I'll look into getting set up on NiceHash, and yeah, we can also look at the EF about setting up some miners on our own instances, and yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Any other merge related discussions for today?
Oh, when do we expect client releases with the Ropsten stuff baked in?
Prism was planning a release on the weekend before that, so maybe next Thursday, Friday, we will have a release.
Yeah, for Lighthouse, we'll have this by the end of this week, early next week. We're just working on getting the significant merge related changes in before the actual upgrade, so to get as much testing as possible. Pretty confident we'll do this, and we'll also add our boot nodes to the merge testnets repo. Yeah.
Or Teku will be early next week, Monday or Tuesday.
Awesome, thanks. And just to reiterate, there was one change since the PR was created. So please do make sure that you're on the version that was merged in, like the Genesis SSE file and the Genesis delay.
Yeah, Nimbus, same thing there. We just did a release today, but we're going to do a small point release just for Ropsten next week sometime.
Great.
On the same topic, we are expecting spec releases as well, right? And like engine API and consensus specs.
Yeah, I believe like a release candidate on the consensus specs, and then I don't know how. I know the engine API, the execution APIs have been alpha releases, so it might just be another alpha release. But yeah, I need to do a bit of cleanup. I was doing a bit yesterday. I think we're in a pretty good spot on the consensus specs, and try to get that release candidate out tomorrow. It's not necessarily meaningful, other than just kind of signifying this is what's going into Ropsten. I don't think there's really changes for y'all. Okay. Other merge related items for today. Any update on? Oh, go on, please.
Speaking of Ropsten, we're also working on a few blog posts on how to start Ropsten beacon node, how to use free recipient and stuff. I'm wondering if there's like an effort for more general blog posts on just how to launch Ropsten beacon node, so that we can point our blog post to that one.
Tim, you've been working on a Ropsten blog post that's going to have some of the details here, right? Or at least like some of the high points.
Yes, I was looking for something to link for people who wanted to launch a Ropsten beacon node. So Terrence, if you have that blog post ready in the next, like, I don't know, like before midweek next week, I would happily link that in the EF blog post. Like it basically says like generally what people needs to do, but it doesn't run through actual like how do you do it step by step. So if you have like a good thing there, yeah, that would be really, really helpful.
Awesome, thank you.
Is Ropsten blog post going to reference the fact that you should set your fee recipient so that people get used to that, but not like point out how to do it on each one?
Right, because exactly, that's like a good example, because each client like implements, fee recipients differently. It says, look for a fee recipient value in the configs of your client to make sure you set that, but it doesn't go through like, here's how you do it on Nimbus and Prism and Lighthouse and Deku.
Okay. Other merge related items? Okay. I do recommend maybe having someone on your team jump into all core devs next week. It just seems like over the next 4 to 6 weeks, there'll be relevant conversations happening in both these calls. Okay. Are there any other client-related updates that teams would like to share today?
Jacek mentioned Nimbus release. We have a couple of interesting updates for the release. Let me check the release notes. Sorry. Yeah, so we have in prod now the proposer boosting. We have faster, snappy, reduced CPU usage as well for when clients sync with Nimbus. And we had some focus on Web3 Signer. Normally, we have better compatibility with all. And one thing that we released is BLS threshold signatures. So the idea is that now, especially staking pools, can have signing keys that needs to be like you need 5 out of 8 or something to actually sign a block or an attestation, and this so that they don't need to give the full keys to their sysadmins or DevOps team, which is one of their concerns once they have a fleet with millions of dollars, and a disgruntled employee could cause issues there. So that's it for Nimbus client itself, and otherwise we have the light client protocol. We made some progress, and there is a Ethan, who's working on the spec and implementing it at the same time. You can look at it in the related Ethereum repo, and also, well, still trying to push and implement MEV and MEV boosting for the consensus layer.
Thank you. Any other updates?
Yeah, I can go next for Lighthouse. We proposed a PR to the Beacon API spec to prevent production of attestations and SIM contributions to optimistic blocks. So it's PR 216 on the Beacon API's repo. We don't really expect this to be controversial, but kind of want people to be aware of this since it's a pretty significant, important change that would essentially allow us to prevent finalization of invalid execution payloads. So please take a look. We've also made our discovery IPv6 compatible. We essentially decided not to enable this until after the merge, but it's ready. We've started speccing and implementing EPI sub prototype, so epidemic meshes for Gossip Sub. See it as a significant upgrade to Gossip Sub. We started working and implementing the fee recipient method for the validated client from Standard Key Manager API. And that's pretty much it on the client's side, but you've probably seen Michael has done a bunch of work on block print for client diversity metrics. Check out his tweet if you haven't.
Thank you. Other updates?
I can go next for tech. So we we have some additions for the upcoming release for the next week. Some of them are related to our REST API framework that becomes we are moving we are changing our internal framework to be a little bit more optimized in terms of memory consumption, because we are now able to stream JSON directly to networking. So we have less memory pressure when we are dealing mostly with big APIs that streams, for instance, states that are usually very big objects. So a big win for Infura, for instance. And we have some optimization on the BLS batch validation, for instance. And we also have additional optimization on the events, REST API events. We're still on memory pressure on that side. Big wins there. And we also implemented the ETH1 checksum. This has been a good contribution from an external contributor. So we are now applying checksum on the ETH1 address. This applies to fee recipient, for instance. And we are working on the Builder API. And today we had very interesting results. First successful testing around Builder APIs. So we are now be able to run the Beacon blinded REST API flows plus Builder get header and get payload APIs. They're working, and we are also falling back with our local execution client when things that goes wrong on the Builder side. What is missing here is validator registration, signing, and Builder bid validation, signature validation, but yeah, we are close to having everything implemented on that side. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I can go next. So Prism released version 2.1.2 this week, which includes Go 1.18.1. Also, it has a few important bug fixes, a few optimizations. Aside from that, we're just catching up with the spec changes. We are also working on saving blind block instead of saving full block, meaning that the execution payload will be header. Hopefully, will see reductions on the DB size on that. And then also we're working on Builder API implementation. We are done with the implementation. Right now we're on testing with the merge mod, trying to write some sort of end-to-end test. And on the UX side, we're working on config and cli for a user to specify guest limit, and then the desired builder fee recipient. And then we're also on the background, we're working on EIP 4844 with the Optimism team. And then we also have 2 new hires that just joined us. So Nick will be our full-time tech writer, and Samantha is our new Go developer. So yeah, well, welcome to those guys.
Great, thank you.
I can speak quickly to Lodestar.
Cool.
Last week we released version 0.36. Had a few goodies. We have validator metrics in the validator. I believe that we also include proposer boosting in this release, and we also fixed a security vulnerability where someone could create malicious but valid slashing at a very, very high slot number and cause Lodestar to have a consensus split. So that should be fixed. Upcoming, we're going to be implementing the light client spec along with Itan, and getting ready for an audit of our code base and hopefully subsequent version 1.0 release next month.
Sweet, thank you. Anything else? Any other updates?
Yeah, so this from Grandina team. So we extended the web signer support with multiple signers and keys loading and other things. And also started to work on a custom task scheduler to replace the Rayon that we use for parallelization. As since we optimized for the 8 to 16 cores CPUs and for CPUs with just a few cores or a lot of cores like 32 or so, the performance should be better than it is now. So we are working on this custom scheduler, and also improved memory consumption, which significantly decreased. It wasn't high previously, but now it's even smaller. So that's all.
What does your mainnet memory consumption look like, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't know. Actually, I talked with Leo from Barcelona Supercomputing last week or week before, and I think they have these graphs with memory consumption, but it's pretty low now. I don't know. It's like a couple of gigs or something like that. So it's not that high.
Got it. Okay. Any other updates? Great. Moving on, research spec and otherwise. Actually don't know what your name is, but rwer13 is here to talk about essentially exits, a method to initiate exits from OX01 credentials from the execution layer.
Yeah, could we please move the discussion to the last 30 minutes of the time? My teammate wanted to join, and then he would be able to participate as well.
We can definitely talk about step deprecation and anything else, but I don't know if we're going to make it to 30 minutes from now. But let's jump into step deprecation.
Thank you.
This has been, let's see, this has been up since March 18th. Pretty much looking for any final feedback on this. I believe everyone was generally fine. I think maybe only one client team is utilizing step in one edge case, but it's not really utilized, and the goal here is to reduce some complexity and have a backwards compatible way to do so. I guess I'm putting this on a final call. We don't have a process here, but No one said anything bad about it. I think that we're intending to just move forward with this as the specification. Is there anything else people want to discuss on this issue before we merge it and get in a release?
Since I wrote it, I can note that there is a very similar PR coming up for the Beacon API as well, which basically allows the consensus client to implement both by root and by range requests with mirrored API calls in the JSON RPC call, and that one doesn't include a step parameter, let's say, yet, because I kind of assume that this PR will get merged since nobody complained so far. But the two things are related. So the point of simplifying this right now is that there's an actual reason to do so. It's not like, yeah, it's not just a fun change.
Right. And I'm gonna toss this other issue in the engine API onto all core devs next week, just to make sure that execution layer clients have taken a look at it. I know that there's been a little bit of review in general, positive, and it enhances, a feature that Lighthouse has already built out using the standard ETH API. I think it's likely a no-brainer as long as we get thumbs up all around.
Yeah, I think I'll just briefly outline the one thing that I see as an issue or as a discussion point in that PR, and I can repeat it later in the all core devs. But there is the question of whether ELs should support both by hash and by range requests. And the by hash requests, they're kind of mandatory in order to grab forks or non-heads, whereas range requests are excellent for the canonical chain and finalized data. But strictly, the range request is an optimization. So in the Beacon API spec, it's done in a way that ELs are free to not implement the range request, and then CLs should fall back on root requests. Of course, if everybody just agrees that range requests are absolutely fantastic, we can remove the optionality from there and simplify the CL as well to not have this fallback logic. But that's kind of like an open question.
Got it.
But we need this by root requests as well, right? Or by hash, I would call them by hash requests.
Yes,
we are
we do
requesting non-canonical.
Yes, we do need both. So it's a question of do we mandate both requests to be implemented by the EL, or do we say that only by hash, which is the more powerful request, is mandatory, and then the range request is optional and an optimization, basically? And this is really down to, I think, the implementation effort in ELs. Because obviously not having this fallback logic is more simple on the CL side.
Right. I did just toss it on all core dev agenda for next week to get some visibility. Jacek, if you could join, that would be helpful.
I will do my best.
Okay. Is anyone against this step thing? I'm gonna drop it in the consensus dev chat and ask for any final review, and then we're gonna merge this thing and put it in the release.
Yay!
Yay, indeed. Okay, we managed to kill 5 more minutes. Are there other things that people want to discuss today? How about just a quick update on the shadow fork? It looks like things are going well, and we were just confused by how Block Explorer was importing things.
Yeah,
numeric?
exactly. So the Explorer seems to be running into some issue where it's failing to import a slot. I'm not sure why it's complaining it's an invalid chain ID. So it's just listing every slot as 0 transactions. The slots actually had transactions, and you can query the node and check the slots. So in general, we have a really, really good shadow fork with an equal client split of a possible 97% participation. We're at 97%. So essentially no client combination went out of sync post-merge, so we survived the transition. The missing 3% was related to an unhealthy shutdown on Besu, and that happened far before TTD, so it's completely unrelated. We are only running Aragon with Prism right now, but that combination is working. Yeah, that would be the update from the shadow fork. Congrats, everyone.
That is fantastic news. So the race conditions with the async calls, were those patched? Because
we still need to check now.
Okay.
There are transactions, but we're not sure if there are transactions in every slot. We still need to check that.
We would expect, based off of the Lodestar's update, I think we would expect Lodestar to still be having the empty ones.
Exactly. I think some clients didn't patch them, so if there was a bug before, there'd likely be a bug after.
Okay. Fantastic news. Excellent. Okay, we killed 3 more minutes. Can we discuss this? We can also discuss it on the next call if you do need your coworker to join in. It's up to you, Artem. And before that, any other discussion points that anyone has for this call? Okay.
So I saw raising discussions of the deposits functionality, and teams would like to change it or kind of get rid of the current approach. Is it is it the idea to have something in the next hard fork, or this is just somewhere in a very far future?
We could certainly entertain it for Shanghai Capella. It's probably like if we have a low complexity path, then I don't see much issue. You know, we'd kind of be debating whether it's just kind of worth the time at that point. I do personally believe, and I haven't spec'd it out or explored it fully, but I believe you can just likely reduce the follow distance to 1 and make ETH1 data a validity condition, such that you toss out blocks with bad ETH1 data. This you could use existing endpoints on the ETH endpoint, or you could potentially escalate or elevate this to the engine API to reduce the dependency on the ETH endpoints. Obviously, then you still have kind of the machinery of having to get the deposits out of the EL and stuff. You could also elevate that into an engine API endpoint. So there's a number of like little design considerations. If we do want to prioritize shortening that distance, I think the most straightforward way is to just reduce the follow distance to 1 and kind of deal with the implications of that. But you could certainly also probably do a bit deeper redesigning and get maybe a more elegant mechanism, but then it's debatable as to whether it's worth the complexity.
Also, okay,
sorry,
go ahead.
Just to clarify, by more elegant, do you mean removing the voting process and all of that?
Well, by reducing the follow distance to 1, the voting process just becomes 1 of 1, and it's safe as long as there's a validity condition on the block for ETH1 data to be correct. So I think you could potentially more tightly couple. You could probably get rid of ETH1 data. You could make the engine API return deposits and maybe get rid of some of the Merkle root processing. I don't know. I imagine if you are more willing to redesign, you could probably get rid of some of the other stuff. But I think the most straightforward way is to reduce the follow distance to 1, have it, quote, a voting of essentially just 1 slot, and make it a validity condition on, so that it's not actually voting.
There was a good point by Adrian in the chat that considering the optimistic sync, we probably won't be able to just query YAL for verifying this data, like in synchronous fashion.
So I think you'd have to call this optimistic as well if you couldn't get anything you really can't fully verify that you're depending on the execution layer for, would throw it into optimistic.
I think that you mean that skipping verification of deposits, like in the optimistic sync mode?
Right, I see how that's dangerous.
Yeah, that's dangerous.
But
I would say,
is
so
that not what's happening already?
Yeah.
I guess it's not happening
What do you
because
mean?
they assume that the voting threshold is safe enough, so it's not throwing you in optimistic.
Right. So yeah, it's gonna be easily imagined that an adversary will just induce a lot of big deposits and increase its like portion of stake, and force someone like, I don't know, sync with the chain in optimistic mode. Yeah, so it's definitely like a kind of a new attack vector that we will have to deal with. That we ideally don't want to deal with, and and what's possible to do is like if we have a logic of verifying a miracle proof that links the deposit root to the state root of the previous block, for example, but that would require like constructing this kind of proof and also verifying it on CL side. Not sure if it's something that CL client layers want to dig into. But yeah, that sounds like a decent option from a lot of standpoints, but it adds implementation complexity.
Yeah. Okay. So I agree that it does open up an additional potential path attack, or like heightened attack path if you're in optimistic mode. It's an easier way to get keys in there to try to finalize something malicious.
Yeah, I also think that we can easily set, this is like, needs more rigorous analysis, but I think that we can easily set this ETH1 follow distance parameter to 1 and preserve this voting period size as we have it now. But I'm not sure if it's like a huge UX improvement that we want to make. So that's even worth making.
I do challenge the this actually making it much worse, because you still because everyone's using this as a validity condition. In optimistic mode, you're essentially like you're kind of in like honest majority mode on execution layer validation, because you're following the fork choice and finality of the people that are voting. And so if this is a that doesn't really change much. If if you make this a validity condition, you're still relying on everyone's attestations and finality votes, so you're still in the kind of this honest majority situation. It's just what that honest majority can do to you is slightly heightened, I suppose.
Yes.
Or dishonest majority, sorry.
Yeah, but I think that reducing the distance is that we have this large ETH1 follow distance now to protect ourselves from reorgs on ETH1 chain, right? And we will not have this problem post merge.
Yeah,
that's the chain that you're. So definitely options here, but I'm not sure that we want to dive deeper, like to like tightly couple ourselves to the miracle proofs, considering that there is an upcoming Withdrawal 3 upgrade. So think about it.
I will say that if anyone's inspired and wants to kind of try to specify a minimal complexity here option here, that would help with considering it. Right, like right now it's just a few potential ideas, and we if we're going to consider it for Shanghai Capella, we need to get a concrete proposal, you know, in the next some chunk of time. I don't know what chunk of time that is, but sooner the better.
Again, probably.
Is the goal is the goal to speed up the addition to of validators to the state, or this is not a goal of
that would be the goal of the feature, is that this follow distance does not actually potentially really bias anything now that these systems are more tightly integrated, and so we can probably eliminate the follow distance if we specify it properly. Which ultimately is for UX.
But is there kind of need for adding validators at a higher rate?
No, I think the argument is there's probably no need to do it at the slower rate technically. So you can improve UX. It's only a UX thing for onboarding new validators on the order of, you know, a day. And so I would, like, if this was going to get in the way, if this was going to increase ship time or get in the way of something that's very critical, then, you know, I could see it not really hitting the priority list. Okay. Artyom, we have, I believe, killed the amount of time we can kill. Do y'all want to talk about the 0x01 initiated exits?
Yeah, thanks. Vasily is here now, so it's just great. First of all, we've got a question. What do you think, whether with the withdrawals enabled, it's important to add capability to have withdrawal credentials initiated exits? We've got some opinions on the forum on the topic related to the withdrawal credential exits based on a generalized message bus. For us, it seems more or less important from the perspective of any delegated staking solutions, where if the stakers and the pool are not capable to withdraw the funds, thus the validators, which are ideally are trustless, are capable of holding the funds hostage. So the first question is whether somebody's consider this important to try to add alongside with the withdrawals.
So I personally do think that it is weird and potentially bad in the construction right now that the ultimate owner of the funds, the person who has the withdrawal credentials, which often could be the same person or not the same person, cannot initiate an exit. So then you do certainly have, in any sort of, not even on-chain delegated mechanism, but any sort of split there, you have hostage scenarios that could happen. And so I do think that having withdrawal credential enabled exits is likely a good feature to enable. I do think that in Shanghai Capella that we're going to be doing this kind of like cross EL stuff to get the withdrawals enabled, and probably learn a lot as we do it. And I don't know if we'll have the kind of complexity ability to do this other feature. But I'm happy to kind of defer to others on the engineering complexity. I do think that I question whether we need a generalized bus. I don't think OX01 credential rotation actually should be handled by the consensus layer. I think that this, we have smart contract wallets, like you can certainly rotate control over these things in a mechanism rather than having to have this as a programmable mechanism, and then all of a sudden we only have one message that we need to send, unless you predict other messages that we need to send. I don't have a list of them. Are there other messages that you think the execution layer will need to send to the consensus layer over time?
I honestly think that right now and for the foreseeable future, only the withdrawal credential initiated exits are the ones, because like you don't need with current proposals, you don't need messages for the partial withdrawals, and withdrawal credential rotation is not super important. Like even if we wanted it, it's not a priority like at all for now, and it's not clear that it's needed. So I think there is only one message that needs to be passed, but it still needs to be passed in some way from the execution layer to the beacon chain layer.
Yeah. I kind of think we should maybe do the deposit follow distance reduction exploration and kind of keep in mind that we have another potential message to pass in and see if these mechanisms can be very similar.
I mean, we already have one message passing mechanism. It's the deposits.
Certainly.
Yeah, so like JMB is designed like almost exactly like deposits, but generalized. So
I also think that we do need anti-DOS mechanism beyond just people having to pay fees in the execution layer, because being able to grief these mechanisms opens up. I think we can easily avoid people being able to grief these mechanisms, and so we should. Deposits are naturally rate limited to a certain extent because it costs a minimum of 1 ETH. I think it would be best if these were rate limited as well, but likely the only way to rate limit them would be for the execution layer to have some view into the consensus layer. Like if you had the deposit root exposed, you could ensure that just only one validator could submit one of these ever. But we don't have that ability yet. So without that, I don't know if we have an anti-DOS mechanism.
yeah, it can be implemented with like basically reading the Merkle the tree for the state tree for from beacon chain root for the validator. So like you sort of can implement it right now, but it's going to be brittle because like and not very beautiful, honestly, because you need to assume a lot of things about internal structure of the beacon chain layer on the execution layer, and that just adds complexity. I think that like if we can manage this stuff with just fees, we should manage that with just fees because it makes much much less complexity here, and the systems are much less tied up. Like execution layer knows nothing about beacon chain layer, and that's simpler to understand and to reason about. Don't have to track the changes on the beacon chain layer to understand if you need to remake something on execution layer and stuff like that.
So with just fees, though, I can arbitrarily block OX01 initiated exits.
Yeah, for a very high price, basically.
Well, sure. High in relation to wherever the market is at the time. Yes.
For me, it seems it depends a lot on the capability to do a number of checks for the validity on consensus layer clients. And for me, this is the most mysterious part. Like for voluntary exits, there is limit 16. And it's 16 because it's the limit not for the amount of checks, but it's the limit for the amount of exits, and this is okay. But the check itself seemed to be much cheaper, and thus we could make, I don't know, 100 of them, maybe more. This is maybe a question to the client teams, and the price of the attack depends a lot on the amount of the checks we can afford. Like maybe if there is enough room for the checks in a block, then it's enough to make the attack price large enough, even without checks on execution layers, specific checks.
Yeah, so the number is going to cost two things to the beacon chain. One is size of blocks, and two is computational overhead. But yeah, I do see that if you could afford to put a ton in there, then you make the cost of the attack to be sustained even higher.
Why does it influence block size?
These messages are included in the block.
Only the valid ones. The point is to make the checks before they are included.
Everyone
in the block. As far as I got it, looking at the deposits implementation, there is a part of execution where the deposits are cached and the deposit requests deposit events are cached and preliminary checked, and only then they get into the block structure. So the idea is to make the checks along the way.
I might be wrong, but I believe all deposits, including invalid ones, are included, so that anyone can fully verify and to ensure that they're also processed sequentially.
Yes, you're not wrong.
Yeah. I think if you assume a tighter coupling between the execution layer and the beacon chain, you might be able to bypass that. That might be an artifact of assuming beacon chain people operating the beacon chain maybe didn't have access to an execution layer or the proof of work chain, but my intuition is you would likely want to include them all in chain. Especially if you don't include them all in chain, then you have these modes where I can't run a full beacon chain and a light execution client all of a sudden or something like that.
Yeah, so we are out of our depths on understanding the costs of implementing this on consensus clients. That's why we need like a lot of feedback here, and we have no intuition about like how costly is checking for example, reading the validated data structure and checking if the address in it is the same as an address from the exit message, for example. So
I think your primary costs are again going to come from the size of the blocks, assuming that even the invalid ones need to go into the blocks, and essentially, and then computation at that point. The reads from the validated data structure are probably going to be relatively low cost. computing Merkle proofs, if there are Merkle proofs in these, might be a higher cost. There wouldn't need to be any signature, because the signature is just whether it came from the OXO1 address or not.
Yeah, there is no cryptography. They're just reading and checking and place on block. So yeah, the block size can be priced easy enough with a extra fee on the execution layer.
What do you mean extra fee? Like
we can do a smart contract that charges a bit of extra ether to work, like 0.01 for example, or something like that.
Yeah, so you have a minimum cost regardless of gas costs.
Yeah, it can be tied to gas price, the current gas price as well. It's fairly easy to implement. Like the cost on execution layer, if they're simple to calculate, we can use arbitrarily mechanism here.
Are there any engineers or other people that want to chime in on this?
I'm a bit concerned about how it changes existing norms. I mean, all current staking services have been built assuming that this functionality doesn't exist. And whilst I agree it seems like a good idea, we don't want to break anyone's model, at least without giving them a chance to change things up.
Yeah, I fluctuate between agreeing with you and then also considering the current functionality as a bug.
What could break? I mean, can you give an example? I can't see it.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't want to make assumptions. So we should do some due diligence at least, and then satisfy ourselves that actually this is fine.
I mean, the idea to do this has been out there for probably longer than we have even had the beacon chain, and I don't think I've seen anyone ever say that it breaks anything. I don't know. I can't see it.
How many third-party staking services are there that potentially might break? Like, is it 3? If so, we can just reach out to them and say, hey, we're looking at this, just FYI. Or is it hundreds?
If we're talking about on-chain stuff, like Lido Rocket Pool, what Stakefish does, there is about, I think, 6, and none of them are relying on that. And I think Lido and Rocket Pool are actually relying on this being included at some point, not reliant, but would appreciate. And for stuff that is not public and advertised, I honestly don't know, but I think there is regular contract stuff that a staker has a contract with an operator, and they sort it out in the legal field.
Yes, I do know there are some.
Currently, all of them seem to be upgradable proxies, so they all reserve the right to upgrade the withdrawal contract. So I don't think it should cause an issue.
Well, and then I know there are centralized staking providers that do offer this split to some of their customers, but again, I have a hard time rectifying the customer, if they want to exit and their operator isn't initiating an exit and they initiate an exit on by themselves. I don't, and again, that's not OXO1, but I think if you do put this for OXO1, you consider putting it for OXO0 as well. And it's hard to imagine that the ultimate owner of the funds, which is the withdrawal credentials owner, not being able to exit is a good thing. But doing diligence is a good idea. I agree.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's. I think we do need this capability. It does sound like a bug if you can't initiate a withdrawal from the withdrawal address, then it exposes us to another risk, which I wrote on the chat, that since a central contract like the one from Lido could get us to a mass exit situation if there's a bug. Like, you know, suddenly if a third of the validators exit at the same time, that could become an issue. So we would need to rate limit it at least.
It is, exits are rate limited.
Yeah, it's rate
How
limited.
is that different from current exits? I mean, that's the same problem already there, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't
So
change anything.
yeah, it just makes this problem even worse, because a single operation in a contract could cause this mass exit. But if it's rate limited, then there's no problem, and it's already rate limited now, so we should just make sure it remains that way.
Yeah, I think in general it does open up the attack surface for, you know, what people can do if they, and which type of withdrawal credentials they can do things with. But ultimately, if the smart contract or the way you're custodying your keys is broken for your withdrawal credentials, it's certainly bad in any case. I guess I would encourage people to think about this. I think that it's probably worth thinking about as we're examining how to clean up the deposit mechanism. I personally would rather see a more natural rate limit than just gas fees, but I do agree that a fixed fee, or maybe a fixed fee in relation to gas that isn't just, you know, the cost of running it, could also be at least a worthwhile exploration.
Are you speaking about rate limiting on execution layer?
Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't help?
No, sorry. I mean, you're saying the fees on the execution layer are the rate limit. So if you add a fixed fee, then and you quantify the cost of including such an operation on the beacon chain, then that could potentially be a viable path.
Okay.
Yeah, this may not.
Certainly not as elegant as a natural rate limit.
This may not make sense, but what happens if a withdraw key and a validator key both try to withdraw at the same time in the same block?
That doesn't matter.
Possible. That has problems.
Doesn't
matter. Okay.
Both of these it's exits that we're talking about. Exits then eventually become withdrawals after they leave the queue.
Sure.
One of them. So things are processed in a certain order. So if you had a voluntary withdrawal and then you had an OXO1 initiated withdrawal, one of them would need to be a no-op, or one of them would not be able to be included on chain. Like if you had the voluntary exit, if you had to, just kind of depending on the order, but you're right. We have to test for that case, but I don't think it's like
There's something we need to test for, but there shouldn't be any problem with it.
Yeah, no. We kind of already have
fun if there's
some edge cases there. Like if a slashing is included, then you can't include a voluntary exit on chain because that person's already exited from a slashing. So it's not unique that we have to kind of think about how these operations interact. Executable specs, great. Sorry, Yasik, what's up?
No, I was just going to mention the slashing race. It's funny.
Yeah. And that was it's an important case because I don't think we had a test for that one for a long time. But now there's a consensus test for that one.
Well, part of it is unspecified, right? As long as the slashing lives in the pool.
Oh, well, that's a slightly different case. That's a pool management problem. A pool management and block packing problem beyond the state transition problem.
Well, there is an inherent imbalance in that we can accept more exits than certain kinds of slashings in the block. If I remember the block limits correctly, but anyway.
I believe you can put in, well, never mind. I believe you can put in 16 proposer slashings, but like 1 or 2 attestation slashings, but attestation slashings can include quite a bit of validators. Anyway, we digress.
I'm still got a question about doing preliminary checks. I found a place I was thinking about in Prism Client. I've sent the link. This is the function where deposit logs are parsed, and here there is at least a check. Okay, there are some checks for the events, and some of the events are considered invalid, and only then they go further where they get to the part of the execution which is described in consensus layer specs. And my idea was to do the checks here. Am I getting something wrong here or not?
So if you do the check here, then someone who's only validating the beacon chain would not be able to, it would be opaque to them why, maybe if these were indexed and must be processed in order, why they'd be missing ones. If you assume every beacon chain does have an execution engine, then this is probably fine to do there. If you do not, you still have to specify it somewhere though. So I don't know. My intuition is much cleaner to do it the other way. My intuition is that if you do put it in here, then you do kind of limit certain types of lighter versions where maybe I'm only running the beacon chain and I'm not running the execution engine, which although validators shouldn't do that, it's certainly a thing that users might do for some reason or other. So it does reduce the ability to process and fully validate the beacon chain state transition because you have this kind of missing component coming from the execution layer. But I don't know. I would need to think a bit more about whether that can be done in a safe way. Does anyone else have an intuition on that?
And the same problem doesn't happen for the deposits because the checks here are maybe only the checks for the duplicated events.
I would presume these checks are primarily to ensure that they kind of make sure their cache and construction of the tree is valid, but that everything that's emitted from the deposit contract is going to end up as a deposit on chain here. But I'm not too familiar with this code. Okay, any other questions for today? Okay, we're still, by still I mean to do, figuring out how to make this process in the consensus layer a bit cleaner so that people can propose features beyond just an ETH research. If you are interested in speccing out this feature, making a feature directory inside of the consensus layer specs would be the way to do so. There's like if you look in there, there's primarily things bundled into forks, but there is a 4844 feature directory where that's specified, so it can be kind of considered independently of a fork until it's time to integrate it into a fork. So if you wanted to take it to the next level and specifying, that would probably be the place to do so. And I think once you put, if you deem it worth kind of doing, then you'll probably get more eyes at that point. But again, I think there's probably some stuff to think about as we clean up the deposit, or explore cleaning up the deposit structures.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Okay, anything else for today?
Just a tiny note, would everyone be okay with the next shadow fork happening Monday the 30th? So there's more time for everyone to cut releases and we can hopefully test the Ropsten releases. Either Monday or the Tuesday. So 30th or 31st.
I like the idea of having one happen with like the Ropsten releases. And hopefully we get them all by the end of next week so we can have the blog post out.
Exactly. And if a couple of the clients still haven't made the releases, that's perfectly fine, but it would be nice to test whoever's ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you should really make your releases by the 30th.
Oh, no, you should make your releases before that, please. You should really make your releases by the 25th, ideally, so that, because like what would be really good is if the releases are out like next Wednesday, then that means like Thursday we can publish the blog post and like people have the whole weekend to get set up before Genesis of the beacon chain if they want. Yeah, so please, before the 30th. And I guess what we're just saying here is like, we're not doing a shadow fork next week to give people the time to cut a release.
Exactly. And just in general, mod stuff, any quality of life stuff, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Great. I assume the shadow fork still looks good.
Yeah, nothing's changed since the past half an hour or so. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, on that note, let's close it out. All core devs next week. Talk to y'all soon.
Thanks, everyone.
So, bye.
See ya.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.